Today, we're diving into a really common question. How do I know when it's the right time or whether or not I'm supposed to transition out of my job? Let's get ready to unpack. Welcome back to the podcast. We're so excited that you guys are here. And we hope that last week's conversation, if you haven't listened to it, we encourage you to go back because we just started talking and unpacking about this important topic about faith and work, which we love talking about. We could talk about it all day, every day, but today we are going into this specific topic around transitions. We feel like more and more, we see this, especially in our generation. People are left and right changing jobs. I remember one season, I think it was like last year or the year before, half of our small group all had new jobs at the same time.
That was wild. I
Yeah.
felt FOMO because I still had the same job.
Yeah, like, oh shoot, should I change my job? So yeah, I think there's just so many factors that play into it, from everybody. You see so many other people changing jobs on LinkedIn, announcing new jobs, but also the uncertainty around the economy, the uncertainty, due to just, I think COVID also shook up a lot of people like, oh shoot, nothing's for certain. Should I even be doing what I'm doing? But also I feel like a lot of people have this good desire and kind of similar to, again, last week's topic on faith and work. It all stems from this good place of wanting something more, wanting to do good. And the same applies to work. More and more our generation is more purpose driven, more meaning driven. And I think a lot of people, when they don't experience that in their work, they're like, oh, should I just try this thing? Maybe I'll try that thing. And there's nothing wrong with trying things, but I think we want to kind of give some guidelines, give some thoughts around how do we make sure we're not just doing it, not just transitioning according to the world's playbook and what the world says to do, but how do we do it according to God's lens and the way that He wants us to operate. So we're going to share actually two personal stories from our lives, and Alex will go first.
Yeah, I feel like the word transition is the theme of my life. I feel like
Yeah.
every few years it's like a transition, not only career but just in general. But I'll share a little bit about my career and what I do for those of you who don't know me. So, my role for most of my career has been customer facing roles in software companies. So you might be familiar with the term software as a service. So I've been doing that.
SaaS.
SaaS, software as a service. So
Not to be confused with being sassy.
yes. Although sometimes I am a little sassy, but
Yep.
so SaaS, software as a service. So I've been doing that for my entire career, 7, 8 years, lost count. So
At least, yeah.
client facing roles, in charge of revenue. So earlier in my career, definitely tried a lot of things to see what I liked, what I didn't like. I'm not one of those people who just knew exactly I'm going to do this. I'm going to go for it. I actually had many experimental transitions. So
Which I think most people do,
which
especially with more options now, more options, more technology, more just opportunities. I think more and more people are, trying many different things, and
mhm.
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. So, um, I'll share high level my career, the transitions, and why I made those decisions. Some not so godly, some a little bit more godly. So start off my career in a startup. So you might be familiar with the role customer success manager. So that's the title I was at, and that was a small tech company. Now it's a unicorn, over definitely well over billions of dollars today. But when I joined, I was fresh out of college, was very eager, wanted to do a lot of things, was very ambitious. But after about a year, I actually got bored. I
There's
was
the B word again.
Grace does not like the B word, bored, because she doesn't never gets bored. But after a year, I honestly asked myself, "What is my calling? What has God put me here?" And I don't feel like my job is fulfilling my gift and my calling. And so for the next 6, 7, 8 months, I was literally thinking that every day. I
Oh
was
my
I
god.
I was miserable,
How do you
and I was
yeah.
so confused about my career and my life because I'm an idealist. So my person Myers-Briggs personality type is an INFJ, which apparently is an idealist. So I am all about trying to live the ideal life. And my career did not live up to my ideal expectations. So
And you have maximizing as a strength too,
yes, I do have maximizing as a
which
strength.
can be a curse.
Yeah, yeah, it can be a curse, but we'll dive a little deeper in my personality some other time. But so I was at this job. I did actually get promoted in the role, which was awesome, right? But I still felt bored because I felt like it was routine. So I was contemplating whether to switch companies actually because I felt like the product I was working with didn't resonate with my soul or I'm even passionate about it. There's that P word, passion. So I actually took a job working at a big company called LinkedIn. So follow me on LinkedIn, Alex Tran, if you haven't already. So I took a job at LinkedIn, and honestly, I wasn't very. This was one of those not so godly decisions. So I was, I think, like 24, 23, 24, 25, I forget, but early 20s. And I felt like this door was an open door that God presented. And sure, God presents open doors. But if I were to look back, my motivations were actually more worldly driven. It was literally double what I was making at my last company and more benefits, all that glamour and all the food at LinkedIn, amazing food. But when I got there, I felt like I had a sense of pride that developed and I wasn't liking what I was doing. So I was working in sales and I was so miserable, did not like it. And after about 6 or 7 months, I actually got let go. And to me, I took it as number one, I'm not good at this. And two, it was almost like a curse, I would say, of disobedience
Mm,
or just not making very godly decisions. And it was like not a punishment, but it was like a hard lesson learned.
like humbling you.
Yeah, yeah, it was definitely a humbling experience. So, after LinkedIn, did some soul searching, just thinking about, okay, what do I really want to do? I don't like sales. I don't want to do sales. So I'm going to go back to this customer success thing. So that's where I went to my next company, and that was actually like my dream company. Great culture, loved it. It's like number one on Glassdoor as of today. So really, really great culture. Really great CEO. I feel like I'm pitching it for them. so
You
um,
should sponsor us.
yeah, exactly. But this one I felt was more of a divine or like a divine career opportunity, but because I actually got the job without applying for it. So it was just through a lot of divine connections that introduced me to this opportunity. And I felt like the job itself was so daunting for according to my experiences because it was a very strategic role, a very important role in the company, and I definitely did not have the experience to do it, but I felt like God gave me the grace to do it. So I was a little bit more mature in my faith at that time, so I felt like it's okay to step through this opportunity. So that's where I moved from Southern California to the Bay Area where we live now, and yeah, I worked at that company, but it wasn't all rainbows and sunshines.
It was at
I
first.
It was at first, definitely at first, but I would say the last year was really, really hard. Just oh gosh, I hope she doesn't listen to this podcast, but just had
Just
a
don't divulge details.
I won't divulge details, but just had a very difficult manager who didn't see eye to eye. I felt I felt a bit micromanaged and every day was me living in crippling fear. It
Mm,
was really bad,
mm.
and Grace can even attest to this.
Yeah, it was affecting our marriage. Like every day, it's
Mhm,
like weighing on him. It was weighing on me because I'm now married to him and
mhm,
his burdens I carry with him. So, yeah, but I really loved your approach to it because you were like, I want to be just faithful. Like God brought me here, so I'm not going to just ditch or jump ship just because it's hard. And you really actively sought how to love this person, how to honor this person, and even point them to Jesus, even though you yourself were like having such a hard time.
Yes, I had I would say estimated 5 managers, and the last one a little tougher, and I for sure contemplated, okay, do you want me to stay? Do you want me to go? I don't really know, but I feel like he's calling me to stay, to love this person, to bless her, to really bless my enemies as
Mm,
Jesus commanded. So I
yeah.
actually stayed with this manager for a year.
Mm,
It was one of the most painful years of my career. I yeah, I think I had nightmares. I had
mhm.
my health, my mental health was not doing very well. Um, yeah, I won't divulge too much details. There's a lot to get in there. But I felt like after a year, it was time to go.
Yeah. And
And
I want to also put out there, we're not promoting, we don't want people to feel like if you're in a toxic work environment that you need to stay. Like sometimes it
mhm,
really like for your sanity, for your emotional mental health, you really do need to change. But I think the point Alex is making is he heard from God to stay, that he sensed that calling to be a light, even though when it was hard, Jesus suffered his way to the cross. And not that you were going to the cross, but it was definitely a cross that you were carrying and that you felt like God wanted you to carry instead of just let go of. So,
yeah, I
yeah.
would say even though it was hard, it was my richest ministry where I
Mm,
got to meet and pray together with Christians. I got to be friends with executives who were Christians.
right.
I mean, who still are Christians, and it was such a beautiful It was such a blessing.
And you still keep in touch with those people too.
Yeah, yeah. I still keep in touch with a few of those people, which leads me because of my experience at Gainsight. That's how I got my next opportunity where I am now. How I got this was also, I feel like, was divine. So actually, my former coworker at Gainsight, the company before, he actually joined Udemy way before I did, and he referred me to the opportunity because he was a good friend, and I felt like this was a divine connection. And so, okay, great. I just laid this opportunity before God and asked God, "Do you want me to pursue this?" And I didn't hear like a clear yes, do it or no, but I felt like it was enough of a push for me to pursue this.
Mhm.
So throughout the interview process, I was just praying, okay, God, give me wisdom,
Mhm.
give me discernment, give me a sense of conviction and peace that you want me to be here, not to
Right.
make more money or to um, build on my resume, but is this glorifying to you? Is this job even enjoyable to begin with? And
Mhm.
second, do I sense you sending me here in this new mission field?
Right.
And so the answer was yes. I got the job, and now I'm here, and it's actually been the best job and company that I've worked for. I love everyone there, my managers, the culture, my work. I mean, it's not perfect like any job because we live in a fallen world, but
Yeah.
it's pretty good.
It's
I would
really
say
good.
it's the number one company in my
Yeah.
career so far. So yeah, I feel like in this season in my career now, I try to be intentional about people, about loving people. I share the gospel pretty obviously on my LinkedIn if you follow it. But definitely lots of God opportunity there. So the lessons I learned just throughout my career is one, inquire of the Lord, like David, just inquire of the Lord. And it doesn't mean you'll get answers right away, but it's just the practice of asking God, like putting God before you in your
Mhm.
decisions. Like, hey, do you want me to pursue this opportunity?
Right.
And also be honest with yourself. Why are
Mhm.
you pursuing this? I feel like in our generation, in millennials, that people jump all the time from
Yeah.
job to job. Like they take
Right.
one job, they interview, they're there for like a month, and then they switch jobs.
Yeah.
It's I don't know. I don't know the full story.
Yeah.
Of course, I can never judge, but
Right.
it from the outside, it feels like okay, there must be a little bit more to unpack here.
Right.
So
I think the point is, again, the point is not like that's wrong, this is right. It's like just include God in your process, right? Because we do know, I mean, we're all humans. It is easy just to pick things because there's a shiny object syndrome.
mhm,
Shiny object syndrome. That's a tongue twister. That it's very real. And so instead of just chasing things like, oh, that's a great opportunity to make money or to elevate my career, climb the corporate ladder, maybe that has better stock options, maybe that has a better retirement plan. Instead of just like jumping at those things for practical, self-beneficial reasons or even God glorifying reasons. Today I was actually reading about Saul and how, he actually it's a long story, but basically God told him to do something and he didn't do it all the way. He actually saved some like cattle and some the king of this enemy army, and he said, oh, it's because I want to like glorify God with it, even though God told him not to do that. So I think sometimes we can even justify and hide behind this like false humility, false religion of I'm doing this for God, it's going to be better for God. But what is God really telling you? Like, you have to be honest. That's what you said, to be
mhm,
honest with yourself, because just because on the outside it looks good or godly, it doesn't necessarily mean that's what God is telling you.
mhm. Yeah, it reminds me of a specific career opportunity that I got to while working at Udemy, kind of a like a side hustle almost, but helping someone start a business, being his almost right-hand person that would give me a lot of executive experience. Um, I felt like at that time, sure, try it out a little bit, but over time, I felt like it wasn't the thing God wants me to focus on at that time. Um, and so yeah, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just asking what is pleasing and honoring to the Lord. And also treat jobs as relationships too. Like put yourself in the employer's situation. Like what is honorable to God? Take a job and then they switch really quickly.
Right.
It's kind of like dating
Like
someone.
speed dating, you're not really sure what you're
You're
looking
you're not
for.
really
You're
committed.
not intentional about the process, so you're trying to find, like, the perfect person, but you don't know what it looks like. But it's very similar to the process of dating. When you include God in the picture, it totally changes it on how you date, because
Hmm.
you realize dating is for marriage in God's view, and why did God create marriage? Just to glorify Him. And I think actually we were talking about this earlier, very similar with work. People don't talk about this enough. When you're, um seeing work as a self-beneficial thing, just like if people see marriage as a self-beneficial thing for your own happiness, your own contentment, like of course God wants you to thrive and be happy, but not that's not your ultimate goal. Your ultimate goal and the purpose of that is to glorify God and point back to Him, regardless of how it makes you feel, right? So yeah, I think the same with work. If we view work in the proper form to glorify God for His purposes, it makes it much less about us and way more about Him.
I'll also add that wherever God places you, have integrity and
Mhm.
also be faithful, work with excellence, even if it's hard, even if your peers or your manager mistreats you or you feel like things are unfair. I think in First or Second Peter, I need to look it up, but there's a verse that says to slaves like honor your masters, and that verse has convicted me in that season working for a boss that I didn't vibe with very well,
Mhm.
and it got me through that season. I'll say another thing in terms of transitions is to have one or two really close people who know you well.
Mm.
And for me, I have a friend named Paul,
Shout
and
out to Paul.
shout out to Paul. And I would ask him, "Hey, I'm thinking about this opportunity, and I from what you know about me, what do you think about this?" And a good friend will not answer yes or no, but he'll ask questions like, "Oh, why do you want to pursue this?" Or he'll be honest and just
Mhm.
say, based on your experience and our interactions and what we talk about, this job description does not align with what
So
your
random.
passions. It's so random. He literally, I think,
He said that.
literally called me out one time. Like, this is a little random, Alex.
Yeah. And I
So
agreed. I was like, "Thank you, Paul."
yeah, yeah. You need friends who tell the hard truth.
Yeah, I agree. Although another, you know, next layer to that is at the end of the day, God's voice trumps everything. So no
Mm.
matter what people say around you, you always have to, the top most important filter is God's lens and God's voice, because human wisdom is can't replace divine wisdom. But yeah, that is very helpful and very important.
Mhm.
So yeah, thanks for sharing your story. I think so I'll share a little bit about mine as well. And
Hers is so epic.
I will just put up, I'll just say at the front, I get this question so much. So I think part of the reason we wanted to do this podcast was so I can partially just send this to people, because people always ask me about, like, why did you leave? How did that happen? How did God speak to you? And it's a lot, but I'll try to keep it short here. Always feel free to reach out if you have more questions. Like, we can totally unpack offline too. But what I will say is, you will see in my story very similar lessons learned as Alex just shared, but also some other ones I'll mention as well. So for me, I won't get into like my whole career journey. I'll just focus on two things.
It's
But
like, tell me about yourself.
I know it's like I was born, my parents immigrated, you know. But no, so in college, yeah, I did do a lot of, I think it's very common and very expected and normal to try a lot of different things when you're in college. You literally don't know what you don't know, right? You don't know, do you like this thing? Do you like that? I remember a career person at a networking event one time asked me, like, what kind of marketing are you looking for? Because I knew I was good at marketing. I just didn't know, what I would want to pursue. And I literally blanked out. I was like, oh, there's different kinds of marketing. And I had no idea what kind I wanted to do. So obviously, how I learned, and I do encourage, if this is you, especially if you're younger, if you're, still in college or recently graduated, this is the time to try things and explore and to learn about yourself. Don't just try things because you're like, oh, maybe this is it. Maybe, it's out of like a scarcity or like fear-based mentality, but more to try things to learn about yourself. Like, it's data from your experiences, right? Like, oh, okay, I'm good at this. Oh, I'm not so good at this, or I
Mhm.
like this. This drains me. So really good book about this is Designing Your Life by Dave Evans and Bill Burnett. They should pay me for how many times I mentioned that book to people. But anyway, fast forward. So I heard from a pastor, one of our former pastors once said, the trajectory of your life, you try a lot of things when you're younger, but as you grow older, you should be having the goal of getting more and more clear about what is your specialty, what is the thing that God is focusing you on. And it might not be the same thing like for the rest of your life. It probably won't, but it's important to be a lot more intentional and focused based on the data points you're gathering, in the first few years or decade, of trying things. Use that data to hone in. And so I think, from doing a lot of internships, unpaid internships, volunteer work in marketing, I had this very strong sense and feeling that I think God really does want me to go into marketing, but I'm not really sure. So I remember like end of college being really like confused and also conflicted, because I was like, God, I just want to be used by you how you want me to. So I don't even want to box myself into marketing. If this is not what you want me to do, I could be a journalist, I could be a teacher, like whatever you want me to do. So I was like totally open, and I felt like God was actually pleased by that, because I remember, one time in my prayer time, he was reminding me, it's not about, when we come to God, it's not about, God, do you want me to do A, B, or C? It's more about, God, fill in the blanks. Like, here are the blanks. I'm a blank canvas. Like, I want to be open to whatever you are telling me or showing me, and not just give you these like boxed in options expecting you to bless one of them. And so, yeah, I went on this whole journey. And I mean, fast forward, there's another actually there's another YouTube video you can look up called, I think it's like Grace Chen Passion Talks, about this entire testimony of how God brought me to Google, working in marketing without me ever applying. And it was a really transformative and amazing process of learning to really depend on God and have him just totally wreck me. But long story short, he opened the door into Google. But I knew, like, even before I got the job, it was very clear from my prayer times with God, that this was not for me to hold on to. Like, even though whether or not God blessed me with the job, it was just like Isaac with Abraham. Like, I would need to be willing and open to sacrifice it, to let it go if it came time to do that, And so I think sometimes we're like, oh my gosh, God gave me this. And you're so like caught up in it, you hold on to it too tightly. But I remember being very convicted. I'm like, God, if you make this happen, great. If you don't, that's great too. Regardless, it's not my identity, it's not my possession to hold on to, it's yours. And so fast forward 4-ish years after, I do sense a tug starting to happen. So this was in the middle of COVID 2020. Um,
This one's a pivotal point.
it was a pivotal point. So I remember kind of similar to Alex, I was having struggles with my job. It wasn't because I didn't like it necessarily. It was just really stressful. It was taking a toll on my mental, emotional health, some culture things. But ultimately, I didn't want to jump ship just because it was uncomfortable. I wanted to be faithful. And I really felt like, God clearly led me here for a reason. I do feel like I can be a light to these people, but it is getting increasingly harder. I feel increasingly weighed down. And I don't know, God, like, I'm not going to move unless you really tell me to. So, as I was in this process, it was interesting because then COVID happened, and our church actually, shout out to our church. They had a initiative where they started this like COVID relief platform that helped connect people who wanted to help, because a lot of people wanted to help, they just didn't know how, with people who needed help, and they were looking for some marketing help. So I was like, oh well, I have experience in marketing. I'm stuck at home, might as well just help out. Fast forward, basically, the pastor who was leading that effort asked me pretty quickly into my volunteering, like, have you ever considered full-time ministry? And open that conversation. And it was crazy because I remember my first reaction was I laughed so hard. I was like, haha, very funny. It's like the pandemic. The economy is going down. Everyone's losing their jobs. Why would I consider that? But inside, I was like, oh, shoot, this might be God. Because before I went to Google, I actually did a marketing ministry like internship with my college fellowship in Wisconsin. And I remember having that feeling that God was going to equip me through my experience in tech, to use for ministry, full-time ministry someday. I just didn't know when or how. So anyway, I just processed and wrestled with this for probably like a few months.
3 or 4 months.
Yeah, Alex was in the process too. And I, asked a bunch of people what they thought. I was, very torn about it because I did feel like there is something about this that keeps tugging me. But at the same time, I have all these fears. I have these golden handcuffs. I would be cutting my salary by a lot. I wouldn't have these, benefits and stuff, the Google perks.
Goodbye, free food.
Goodbye, croissants from Levain. One of the cafes has really good croissants. Anyway, there were a lot of like perks I felt like I was letting go of, but even more than that, it unearthed some fears I had even generationally about, oh shoot, if I like do this, and what if I don't make enough money? Would that like set my future kids up for failure? Because I know my parents, did all this for my college success and blah, blah, blah. So it really forced me to truly realize God is my security, like not the money, not the security from a career or a job. And I really need to trust if he truly is calling me to this thing, and that means sacrificing this and trusting him, then I need to be willing to do it. I don't want to live with regrets looking back, being like, wow, I think I missed the boat on that one. I think God was calling me to this and I didn't do it. So I did it. I remember feeling it felt very surreal when I left Google to work for a church. But what was interesting was when I announced this to my Google, colleagues, I got so many emails from people being like, oh my gosh, you're so brave. I wish I could do the same thing, because they had like different passions, or people wanted to work for nonprofits. And I was like, you should do it. But anyway, I don't know where those people are today, but it just gave me even more encouragement, being like, wow, a lot of people want to do this, but it is harder to actually have the courage to step out. Fast forward about 2.5 years, and I kind of talked about this in the first episode of our podcast, but even though like the work was so great and I loved the culture, I loved what I got to do and the impact I got to have for God's kingdom, again, I started feeling, okay, I think God is telling me something is shifting and he's leading me to a different place. And I didn't know what it was. And this is why I mentioned, earlier when Alex was sharing about his journey, how it's very easy for us to just disguise our motives if we're not honest with ourselves. Like, oh yeah, well, this is for God. This is good. But even for me, when I looked at my life and I looked at my what I was doing, it seemed very godly. It seemed all for God's kingdom. Even a lot of people I asked about this were like, oh yeah, the kingdom impact is clear, blah, blah, blah. And you have more security. It's more wise to have a backup plan. But deep down, I knew whenever I talked to God, whenever I was just going about my day, God was just like speaking to me. I knew this was, there was something else that he was shifting me into. And I even remember I was like A/B testing my life. I was like, okay, maybe the shift is just in my role. Maybe it's in how I'm working. Maybe it's, the way I'm operating. So I like did a lot of adjustments, but despite all those adjustments, I still knew it wasn't just that. So yeah, I stepped out. I felt like God was telling me to step out, even though I didn't have an exit strategy. My only exit strategy was to trust that he would show up and show me what was the next thing in the right timing. I just felt like he wanted me to go out without a plan, to really trust him. And thankfully my husband really, really supported that and encouraged me to do the same.
It was
And
scary, but hey, that's what husbands do.
yeah. Yeah, I'm so thankful for that, because I think if it wasn't for Alex's encouragement and reassurance, I probably would have stayed paralyzed, being confused and fearful, probably even until today. I don't know. But anyway, I stepped out and, fast forward, now we're doing this podcast. We wouldn't otherwise be able to do this. We have experienced so many like transformation and breakthroughs because of it. And we're so excited for what's to come. But anyway, I hope that gives you a little glimpse into my journey of really, I think the biggest takeaway for me was just to really be honest with yourself. Like, even if it looks good on the outside, even if you have security, comfortability, if you're doing things that look good for God, like, is it actually what God is telling you? And that's why, again, the number one most important thing is to have that relationship with God, because if you don't know, you can't tell what he's telling you if you don't cultivate that, the sheep will know the shepherd's voice type of knowing. So yeah,
Yeah,
that was a
wow.
lot.
Well, now you know a little bit about our stories and our careers. Definitely not your typical get promoted every year, gonna be director, VP. It is not wrong to
Yeah.
go that route either.
Right. Yeah.
If God calls you to it, and also make sure you guard your heart as well.
Yeah. But
So
I just hope that this story and this journey, because what I've seen for other people is it gives a different perspective, right? Like, I think most people chase the opportunity or the potential, but they don't pursue the purpose. We put our potential over God's purpose because we see, oh, I can pursue this thing to maximize X or Y, Z. And I think at the end of the day, when you look at the Bible, God is always so pleased by people who walk by faith, not by sight, who are empowered by the Spirit and not their own strength. So yeah, I'm really grateful that God's just woven that in my journey, and yours as well,
mhm.
to show us that there's a different way of making these decisions.
Yeah, some more thoughts just on career transitions, knowing what to pursue, when to pursue it,
Mhm.
whether to stay or not. Um, I think what's most important is the danger of not being God led or spirit led, and just being tempted by
Mhm.
shiny objects.
Right.
I believe uh, Adam and Eve, right? They wanted to eat the fruit because they were deceived to have power and
Mhm.
all that good stuff.
And the
Um,
fruit looked pleasing to the eye, the Bible
yeah,
says.
the food looks pleasing to the eye. If you were to translate that to today, it would be, oh, nice, great company, Fortune 500, Fortune 100, great salary, great stock options, RSUs, all that good stuff. It's pleasing to the eye. So really just ask God, inquire the Lord, hey, is this is this pleasing to you?
Mhm.
Is this aligned with your will? Sometimes it's a clear yes, sometimes it's a clear no, sometimes it's ambiguous, and that's
Mhm.
where you use your discernment whether to pursue that opportunity or whether to stay where you are. Um, Also, be honest with yourself. be honest whether you're pursuing something because you feel like there's something called poverty mindset where you feel like you don't have enough money.
Mhm.
You're pursuing things because you just want to honestly to be have a more comfortable life. I mean,
Right.
I was like that,
Or
or
impress
I'm
people.
still like that too.
Yeah.
What's that?
Or impress people like, "Oh, I work at so and so company," or, "Oh, I'm this director, VP," whatever, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You don't want to keep running this rat race of pleasing people, making more money, because even looking at my life now, I make a lot more money than when I first started. Not saying I'm rich or anything, but I think the most important thing is to pursue God, really
Mhm.
love people, and know that wherever you are, it's about forming your character
Mhm.
and being diligent where you are, being faithful, and it's not about your resume, your LinkedIn profile, or your reputation.
Yeah, and one of my mentors, I remember, because I was wrestling with this, at the end of college, I called one of my, disciplers and mentors, and I remember she told me, "Grace, there is no right answer, like, no matter what you do, God will bless and be with you if your motive is just to glorify Him, is to spread the gospel." She asked me, "What is the most important thing that God wants you to do?" And I said, "Uh, spread the gospel?" And she's like, "Yeah, the great commandment, great commission, as we talked about before, right?" So I think again, so often we're caught up in these decisions that seem so big and weighty, but in God's eyes, it's not about the job. It's not about the company. It's about your heart. It's about your character and your trust in Him. And that's what He cares most about. So even in this journey, if you are going through that right now, if you're struggling, like, should I change jobs? Should I, pick this, pick that? I actually want to encourage you is to open up your vision and be like, God, what are you trying to show me about my character, my faith? Are there secret idols that you're trying to reveal to me, whether it's like money or security or people's perception of my reputation? And let Him transform you in this transition process, right? So yeah, I think everything Alex said, I totally agree. And then one last thing too is I think it's always um, really helpful to remember God will position you in places for His kingdom purposes. So you see, like Queen Esther, right, in the Bible is a classic example. Like God made a way for her to be in the palace and to have the favor of the king for His kingdom purposes to save an entire people. Oftentimes we forget that we're on mission for God's purposes. So like whatever you do, do for the glory of God, right? So I just want to,
Yeah, I feel like this is a huge topic that can bleed into how do you hear the voice of God,
yeah,
which we don't have time for this podcast.
yeah,
Maybe in a future episode.
yeah. All right, we're going to end with an action for the week, as we always want to do. So, if you are feeling any doubt about your job, maybe you're tempted to do quiet quitting, as a lot of people are doing, we want to challenge you this week. Ask God honestly what He wants to say to you about it. And not just about God, this job or that job. Ask Him, be open. Be like, God, fill in my blanks, not just ABC, which one to pick, but ask Him to write on your canvas. And you can actually, I think a really helpful way to process this is to journal it down. Just like write down what you're sensing from God as you're reading the Bible, what's standing out to you, what is He highlighting to you. Also, we encourage you to bring this to one or two really close godly friends, as Alex said, and ask them for their thoughts. Ask them, what do you think? Does this make sense? Or what's your perspective on it? That's really helpful. And then three kind of sub questions you can ask God is, God, what are you teaching me? How are you molding my character? And how do you want to use me? I think those questions can really open up our eyes to see, oh, okay, like this job situation, this conundrum I'm in, it's not just about a job, it's about my transformation. So again, God, what do you want to say about this? What are you teaching me? How are you molding my character? And how do you want to use me? And yeah, don't be in a hurry, don't rush through this. You can be intentional about it throughout the week. Maybe ask one question per week more intentionally. But we just hope that these questions help you process and dialogue with God about it, so that your heart posture is in the right way to, or in the right position to glorify God. So we'll end with this verse from Matthew 6:33. It says, but seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. And we just wanted to end with that because I think a lot of the times our fears around picking the wrong job or staying, jumping to another job, it's driven by, well, I need things. I need money.
It's like fear.
Yeah, it's fear driven, anxiety driven, insecurity driven, and it's, again, we are not saying we're perfect. We've definitely gone through this a lot ourselves. And I even remember, when I stepped out of my previous role in ministry, that was one thing I was like, but God, how are we going to make it in the Bay Area with only one income and like all these expenses? But I remember God just reassuring me and reminding me so much that he is the provider. And I again don't want to be on my deathbed looking back being like, oh my gosh, I never lived what God was telling me because I was fearful, because I wanted to control things for
Mhm.
myself. So we really would just want to encourage you that God is faithful, that when you seek him, when you seek living for his kingdom and his righteousness and just being the light that he has called you to be and already made you to be, he's actually in you, empowering you to do that, then everything else literally is going to be provided for you because God is there for you.
We'll definitely do some more unpacking in future episodes, but this is one of our favorite topics. We would love to hear from you. What else
Mhm.
do you want to know about the intersection of faith and work?
Yeah. One quick thing too, if you have any thoughts or questions about this, we would love to hear that. So let us know on our social media. And also you can even leave a voice memo. We have a link in our description. You can leave a voice memo for us and we might even feature it on our show. So just want to put that out there.
Great. See you in the next episode.
If you liked our podcast, we want to ask you to help more people learn how to grow closer to God and experience the fullness he has for them by taking just 30 seconds right now to rate and review this podcast or like and subscribe on YouTube. It's a small action, but it makes a big difference so we can continue serving you with resources like this.
And we'd love to hear from you about your reflections and questions for us to unpack in the future. We invite you to share this episode and tag us and follow us for more encouragement and helpful tools for living fully the way God designed you to.
We pray that God fills you with his love, his joy, his peace, and his wisdom as you continue growing in your daily walk with him. We're so grateful for you, and we can't wait to see you again next week. See you soon.